Welcome back to AI Practitioner Exam Bites. Let's start by reviewing the question from the previous episode, asking about the best example of high bias or underfitting. The answer is B, a resume screening AI that consistently ranks male candidates higher than equally qualified female candidates for tech jobs. This scenario demonstrates high bias because the model has learned an oversimplified and unfair rule favouring male candidates, likely due to historical biases in the training data. This systematic error affects a specific demographic group, women, and it's a classic example of how high bias can lead to unfair treatment in AI systems. Today we're finishing our coverage of responsible AI, looking at 4 exam objectives in task statement 4.2. Recognise the importance of transparent and explainable models. First up, let's talk about the differences between transparent and explainable models and those that aren't. Transparent models are like open books. You see how they make decisions step by step. For those familiar with machine learning models, these are like decision trees or linear regression models. Non-transparent models are more opaque, like closed books. They're complex, like deep neural networks, where it's harder to understand how they arrive at their conclusions. So what's the key difference here? Well, interpretability. With transparent models, you can trace the decision-making process. With non-transparent or less transparent models, you often just see the inputs and outputs without understanding the why in between. Now let's look at some tools that help us identify and work with transparent models. First is Amazon SageMaker model cards. These are like ID cards for your models. They document model details, intended uses, and performance characteristics. Next, the general category of open source models. Many of these are designed with transparency in mind. You can inspect the code and understand how they work. Data documentation. Clear documentation about the training data helps understand the potential biases or limitations. And finally, licensing information. This can tell you about the usage rights and any restrictions that might affect transparency. Now remember, transparency isn't just about the model itself, but also about how it was developed and trained. Now here's where things get a little interesting, as there's sometimes a bit of tension between model safety and transparency. More transparent models can, but not necessarily always, they can potentially lead to being potentially less safe, because if a model is very transparent, it might be easier for bad actors to look at the inner workings and exploit their weaknesses. But on the flip side, more good people's eyes, so to speak, on the workings can also mean the identification and resolution of problems. Now let's look at the converse. Does less transparent models mean potentially safer? Well, maybe. Complex models might be harder to exploit, but they're also harder to explain and trust. So what's the right answer here? Well, there isn't one. The key is to find a balance. We need to measure the interpretability. How easily can we understand how a model arrives at its decisions? We need to look at the performance. How well does the model actually perform its task? And sometimes you might need to sacrifice a bit of performance for better interpretability, or vice versa. As I said, it's that balancing act. Lastly, let's talk about human-centered design in explainable AI, our last objective. This is all about making AI systems that people can understand and trust. Here are some key principles. Clarity. Explanation should be clear and jargon-free. Relevance. Focus on what's important to the user, just not technical details. Interactivity. Allow users to explore and ask questions about the model's decisions. That explainability we were talking about before. And contextual awareness. Explanation should consider the user's background and the specific situation. And finally, actionability. Provide information that helps users make decisions or take actions. And remember, the goal is to create an AI system that empowers users, not confuses or intimidates them. Let's do a review question. Which of the following best describes a transparent AI model? A model that always produces the most accurate results regardless of how it reaches its conclusions. B, a model where the decision-making process can be traced and understood step by step. C, a complex, deep neural network that processes large amounts of data quickly. Or D, a model that keeps its internal workings confidential to protect against potential security threats. We'll review the answer in the next episode, where we'll be starting our final domain, looking at security, compliance, and governance for AI solutions. As always, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video.